Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So welcome everyone to this talk which will be delivered by Dr. Salman. So on remembering the contribution of Professor Khurshid Ahmad in Islamic economics. So before I think I pass the mic to Dr. Salman, so I will be not reading but going through his CV to introduce him to you. So basically, Dr. Salman, as stated on the page there, he's working at the Department of Economics. So as an associate professor, he holds a degree in economics from the National University of Malaysia. And master's degree from Institute of Business Administration from Karachi. And he has a lot of publications under his belt. So 41 peer-reviewed index research papers. And also he has contributed 19 book chapters, in reputable publications like Routledge, Springer, Palgrave, and others. He is also an editorial advisory board member of Emerald International Journal of Islamic and Middle Eastern Finance and Management, which is indexed in SSCI, and field editor of the Turkish Journal of Islamic Economics. And he is also an associate editor of ISRA International Islamic Finance, Journal of Islamic Finance, which is indexed in ASCI and Scopus. So in the corporate sector, he has worked for Mizan Bank, BMC Pakistan, and Bankers Academy USA. He has also worked in 2 research projects as a PI, Principal Investigator for IOFI, on alternate benchmark rate on Islamic finance, and institutionalizing Islamic social finance for social protection. This is for the Institute of Policy Studies and GIZ Germany. So he has also worked as a consultant for Asian Development Bank and at BIS Consulting UK. And currently he is also working as a consultant for Sibafi, Bahrain, on developing training materials for Sibafi Sustainability Guide. Yeah, so that's a lot of achievement. Yeah. I just knew that you are in policy making field. So basically the department and the Kuliah also will be embarking on the policy making in Islamic economics. So you're most welcome to basically join the cluster. Yeah. So I think without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Salman to deliver remembering the contribution of Professor Khurshid Ahmad in Islamic economics.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. First of all, I would like to thank Center for Islamic Economics for inviting me and for arranging this talk on remembering the contribution of one of the pioneer scholar of modern literature of Islamic economics, Professor Khurshid Ahmad. As we know, he died recently, so it's a good time for us to look at his legacy and his contribution to the field of Islamic economics, including the literature of Islamic economics, as well as the policy side and the implementation side of Islamic economics. So this is going to be my presentation outline. So first of all, I would like to give a brief review of his life and achievements and the works of Professor Khurshid Ahmad, in Islamic economics and also beyond Islamic economics. And then since the talk is focused on his contribution to Islamic economics, I would focus on what are his views on different issues of economics, including the comparison of different economic systems, how he contrasts Islamic economics with capitalism, Islamic economics with socialism, how he looks at the approach of mainstream economics, which is focused on atomistic individuals, meaning that it is very much individually oriented, whereas his focus is on collectivism. He emphasizes on the role of family. So we are going to look at how he looks at human beings and also family and its role in society, as well as in economy, and the implications of different institutions of Islam in the socio-economic sphere of life. Then we are going to look at his thoughts on what is his vision of Islamization of education, especially Islamization of education and economics, how he criticizes mainstream economics, what are the points on which he does not agree with mainstream economics, and then what is the alternative he proposes. So we are going to look at that. And then he has also written 2 books, at least, and several research papers on economic development. So we are going to look at what are his views on economic development and what is his vision for getting there and achieving a holistic economic development. And then we are also going to look at what is his contribution in the policy making. So he was not just an educator, not just a person who wrote books and research papers. He was also a very active person in policy making. So what were the policy views of Professor Khurshid Ahmad on Islamization of economy, how he guided certain policy making in Islamic economics, both in Pakistan and also beyond that. And then we are going to look at his policy views on banking and also beyond banking, because he does not look at Islamic economics as Islamic banking alone. He looks at economy in a holistic perspective. So what are his views of how to achieve Islamization of economy within banking and also beyond banking? Finally, we will conclude with some of his personality traits, which I got to know from different people and also by being part of his organization for some time, Institute of Policy Studies, and also what is his legacy, which he has left. So we would conclude with these thoughts. So first of all, looking at the life, illustrious life of Professor Khurshid Ahmad, we know he passed away very recently on April 13, 2025 at the age of 93 years. He was living his last few years in Leicester, UK. He was born in India, in New Delhi, in 1932. He had a 93 years life and very active. And in fact, even in this month, there is an editorial published in his name in Tarjumanul Quran. He was editor of that magazine. And one reason why I am giving this talk is because a lot of people are aware of his works in English, but he has also written extensively in Urdu language as well. And also he has contributed not only in the academic literature, but also in the public mediums like the magazines. He was editor of Tarjuman al-Quran. He also used to write opinion columns, and he has also given some talks in different languages. So altogether, I have tried to summarize his thoughts available in the academic literature, available in the popular media like newspaper columns, magazine articles, editorials, available in Urdu as well as in English language. Now, one of the legacy of Professor Khurshid Ahmad is that he worked for institutional building. He was focused on institutionalizing the efforts and trying to achieve goals in a concrete way. He developed several institutions. Two of them are very prominent, and we can say that he very much single-handedly founded them and also managed them. One was established in Pakistan, Institute of Policy Studies. It is you can say a private sector think tank, one of the oldest in the region, and it has produced tremendous literature on policy issues, including economy, religion, sociology, and climate, and so on. So it is still in operation, and he established in 1979. So it is like almost 50 years old. He was also co-founder of the Islamic Foundation in Leicester, UK. This institution was established in 1973, and through this institution, the message of Islam, as well as how it looks at the contemporary issues, the message got across cultures and also transcended regions. So he co-founded that institution, and this institution has done wonders when it comes to spreading the soft image and the positive side of Islam, and clarifying the misconceptions, and engaging in healthy debates with people who sometimes have apprehensions about Islam. So he has worked a lot on removing Islamophobia and removing the misconceptions about Islam in the West. For his services, he has been awarded by many institutions and all around the world. He got the Islamic Development Bank Award in 1988, King Faisal International Prize in 1990. He got Lariba Prize for his works in interest-free economy and finance in 1998. Then he also got Lifetime Achievement Award for his works in Islamic economics by ICAM. It is an institution, Center for Islamic Economics in Turkey in 2022. And he also got Pakistan's highest civilian award, Nishan-e-Imtiaz, in 2011. So if you see, he got like awards from Middle East, from US, from Turkey, from Pakistan. So he has been well recognized for his tremendous efforts. If we look at his educational background, he started with his master's in Islamic studies from the University of Karachi in 1962. Then he did law as well for some time. And then he was awarded 3 honorary doctorate degrees in education by Leicester University, in literature by Loughborough University, and he was also given honorary doctorate in Islamic economics by this very university. He has held several academic leadership roles. He was advisor to King Abdulaziz University. He was member of Supreme Advisory Council of International Center for Research in Islamic Economics, and he can be regarded as one of the pioneer scholars in Islamic economics. He was also chairman of International Institute of Islamic Economics at IIUI, Pakistan, for several years. He was also vice chancellor of South Asia's one of the prominent economics schools, Pakistan Institute of Development Economics. He was vice chancellor of that. He was also director of Markfield Institute of Higher Education, which is also a very prominent institution in Europe, giving knowledge about Islam and Islamic finance in particular. He believed in steering dialogue with the West. So he was vice president of a standing conference on Jews, Christians, and Muslims in Europe, Berlin, and London. He was also co-chairman of Christian-Muslim Dialogue in Switzerland. He was also member advisory council Center for the Study of Islam and Christian-Muslim Relations. So altogether, he was an all-round person. He was not just a person who was just academic. He held academic leadership roles, steering dialogue with the West, and he also held several policy roles as executive, as part of the government. In Pakistan as well, he was Federal Minister for Planning, Development and Statistics in 1978. He was Deputy Chairman of Planning Commission of Pakistan, looking after the Islamization of the economy, as one of the leading person. He was also Chairman Senate Standing Committee on Finance, Economic Affairs and Planning. He also worked as senator in Pakistan for more than a decade, multiple times. And if you look at his books, he has written on many subjects, not just on economics. So he has written on spreading the message of Islam. giving the positive side of Islam. He wrote an introductory level book, Islam, its meaning and message. He also wrote a book on Quran, on removing the apprehensions about Islam. He wrote a book, Fanaticism, Intolerance, and Islam, and he showed that a lot of times when we see intolerance, terrorism, fanaticism, it's not to be associated with Islam all the time. So he gave a historical report of the roots of fanaticism, intolerance, and Islam has nothing to do with them. Even though sometimes some Muslim societies may have some problems, but it does not mean that there is a root cause which is Islam behind all these things which happen. He also wrote a book, Islam in the West, and he also wrote on women rights, position of women in Islam. He also wrote on family life in Islam. When we look at his books in Islamic economics, he was editor and contributor of a series of books, which is titled as Studies in Islamic Economics, and it has been published several times in 1980, 81, 82, 86. He also wrote a book on Towards Monetary and Fiscal System of Islam, in which he talked about monetary economics as well as the fiscal side of Islam. He also wrote two books on economic development, one on economic development in an Islamic framework. We are going to look at the main points of this book as well in this talk. And he also wrote a book, Islamic Approach to Development, some policy implications. He also wrote a book, The Contemporary Economic Challenges and Islam. And besides that, he has written several research papers on highlighting the contrast of Islamic economics with socialism, with capitalism, writing on global financial crisis, writing on environmental problems, and what Islamic economics has to offer to these crises of economy and ecology. His books have been translated in multiple languages and published in many countries around the world. Several PhD theses and postdoctoral works had been done on his works in Japan, in UK, and also in Pakistan. His writings and initiatives had shaped modern Islamic economic theory and inspired countless students, academics, and activists globally. His style of writing is very lucid, but still very scholarly, visionary, and exhibited his breadth of reading, intellectual insights, clarity of thoughts, and passion for meaningful change. And we are going to see that in his works, even though he is idealistic, but he is also realistic. It's not like he is just giving a vision and no way to get there. He gave, we can say, a blueprint of how to realize the vision as well in a realistic way, not just in a utopian or in a vacuum. So if we look at his works on comparative economic systems, so first of all, we look at how he looks at capitalism. So like we say that he is very much balanced and realistic and not like biased and very much idealistic or utopian. Like when he talks about capitalism, he recounts both the successes as well as the failures. So in his works, he has highlighted some successes of capitalism, which are the positive points. So even though like his views are not going to be giving a defense of capitalism, he criticizes, but before he makes a criticism, he also acknowledges certain positive points of capitalism, certain successes of capitalism, like in capitalism, in capitalistic history, especially the modern capitalistic history, we do see economic development happening around the world. In many regions, we do see increase in productivity. We do see adaptability to technological changes, to different scientific developments and revolutions. And we also see creativity and innovation in capitalism. So he like admits that there are some positive points in capitalism, but there are failures, which he also highlights, like there have been increased inequalities in income as well as in wealth, and also there has been damage to the environment. So he also recounts the failures of capitalism. He thinks that capitalism overemphasizes efficiency, even though it is important. He does not say that efficiency is not important. Efficiency is important, but the important dimensions of equity and justice should not be ignored. So he wants to have a balance between efficiency and equity. And he wants to highlight that the socio-ecological consequences. So when we make economic choices as agents and when we make economic policies, there are social implications of our actions and policies, and there are ecological consequences of our choices and policies. So he cautions that the socio-ecological consequences of economic choices shall not be ignored. And it's not that we have to just avoid and give away efficiency. It is important, but equity, justice, socio-ecological consequences of economic choices are also very important. Now he thinks that because there is overemphasis on efficiency as compared to equity, so what happened was that the issues of distributive justice, the quality of life, and sustainable growth were undermined. And this is what is confirmed by the literature as well as the evidence that in the initial part of the economic development story in capitalism, we see not much focus on human-centric development, and we see a very narrow approach to economic development where we are not looking at the holistic picture, looking at the quality of life. Rather, we look at humans as just consumers and as inputs in the production process, whereas he wanted to have human-centric economic development. So in his book and papers, he has talked about the ills in capitalism. Like he mentions that if socialism erred on the side of collective extremism, capitalism's failures can be traced to its emphasis on unbridled individualism. So that is the problem with capitalism, that it is not only individualistic, but also giving complete freedom to the individual to make economic choices without any regard to morality and to the ecological and sociological consequences of economic choices. So that is one problem with capitalism, unbridled individualism. And socialism is also not perfect. It also is bringing collective extremism. Whereas in contrast, the Islamic approach, according to Professor Khurshid Ahmad, is different in a way that it is holistic, meaning it does not just use one of the polar extremes. It is holistic, that it takes the best of both systems and even more systems, and then he talks about what is the holistic nature of economic development in Islamic economics. He says that instead of a piecemeal and incremental approach, our approach is more holistic, integrated, and all-embracing. So it means that Islamic economics is complementing the positives which are there in capitalism and some of the points which are there in socialism, but the Islamic approach is more holistic, more integrated, and all-embracing, including the human-centric economic development, ecological challenges, and distributive justice, and so on. Instead of just focusing on change in the external environment, he focuses that Islamic economics is transformational. It transforms the individual, including the values the individual holds, the morality which the individual should keep into account, and that should reflect in conduct, that should reflect in economic choices. So he wants the human beings to be transformed according to the values and morals which we get in the revealed knowledge in the Tawhidic epistemology, and that is not to be just learned, memorized, and talked about. It has to be reflected in the conduct, so that we can have an all-embracing change in agent, and which can also bring about a holistic change in the socio-economic. He focuses on Islamic economics being much more than just capitalism minus riba plus zakat. So he says that while prohibition of riba and institutionalization of zakat are important pillars of Islamic economic system, they are part and parcel of the Islamic economic system, but Islamic economic system has much more to offer. Not just in terms of some difference in goals, but also in terms of difference in the kinds of institutions that we see in Islamic economics, the kind of operating principles Islamic economics gives to organized democracy in politics, organized economy through markets. So there are important distinctions in terms of operating principles and also in the governing framework, which has an impact on both the resource allocation by the economic agents at the micro level, the consumers and producers, and also resource allocation by the government acting as the regulator. And Islamic economics also has its own scheme of distribution, which is not just focusing on market-based functional distribution of income, but also secondary distribution of income, which is beyond the market through the institution of zakat, wakaf, sadaqah, and using the values of ihsan, benevolence, and so on. So even the Islamic economic system embeds some of the features of capitalism, like private property, it is allowed in Islam, but under the value framework of Islam. Islamic economics allows enterprise, profit motive, self-interest pursuit. Islamic economics allows market mechanism to work for coordination between buyers and sales. Islamic economics is not against competition, which brings about increase in consumer welfare, but the scope of all these principles is to be determined under the value framework of Islam. And the Islamic morality is not just a set of don'ts, it is a set of don'ts as well as some do's. And it is more comprehensive as compared to the secular morality, which only looks at preventing harm. Whereas Islamic morality is very much focused on both the prevention as well as some affirmative action whenever there is a opportunity to act in good ways. Islamic economics emphasizes on affirmative actions as well as preventive actions in the moral sphere of life. Under the Tawhidic epistemology, Islamic economics says that we can have property, but whenever we get some property or some power as having a role of leadership, and when we get authority as government, as decision maker, as consumers, as producers, so when we have some authority to make economic choices, social choices, when we have some power to regulate things, when we have personal and private property, we should not ignore our role as agent of Allah. We are agent, Khalifa, and we have to act in a way so that we fulfill the trust, amana, under the clearly defined limits of rights as well as obligations. So Islamic economics gives not only the property, power, and authority, but it also mentions that these have to be exercised under the Islamic epistemology, Tawhidic epistemology, and Islam gives the rights, hukuk, as well as the obligation, which are the farais. So he mentions each of these points. Then he criticizes capitalism on another level. He says that market responds to subjective wants, meaning the wants are subjective, meaning there can be a difference of view as to a particular want is really urgent or not. And market does not respond to objective needs. So when we define demand in economics, we define it as wants backed up by purchasing power, not necessarily whether these wants are essential or not. If they are backed up by purchasing power, there would be a demand, and the producers, they look at what is the market demand. Based on that, they allocate their resources, their inputs to produce what is demanded. And what is demanded is not necessarily the objective needs. They are subjective wants. And he says that market responds to subjective wants rather than objective needs. So when it comes to needs, this is very much objective, that a particular person would need a particular level of calorie intake, would need clothing, would need shelter. So these are objective needs. There would be a universal consensus on these things being called needs. So there's an objectivity behind the definition of what constitutes needs. But when it comes to wants, it is very much subjective. So what happens in capitalism, the luxuries, the resorts, the expensive entertainment, billions and billions of dollars going into organizing entertainment, sports, films and video games, that would happen even though that same amount is more than the entire development budget in some of the developing countries. So market responds to subjective wants according to him and not to objective needs. And he says that there is a tussle between greed of the rich versus needs of the poor. So those who are rich, they have greater, you can say, power in terms of dollar votes. So markets are allocating resources based on dollar votes, and the rich have more dollars, more voting power as compared to the poor. And capitalism would be neutral when the poor person is having willingness to pay for needs which is less than the price. Capitalism would think that it is the poor person's sovereign choice that his willingness to pay is less than price, even though it is not his sovereign choice. It is his moral dilemma. It is his problem that he is not able to afford, rather than not being willing to afford. So it's not like if he is not able to afford food, it is because his willingness to pay is less than price. He does not have the affordability. So the greed of the rich versus needs of the poor is a tussle which is there in capitalism, and capitalism does not have a moral basis to solve it. And through markets, it cannot be solved because markets only serve subjective wants, not objective needs. Economics remains neutral on the pretext of consumer sovereignty. But when we say consumer sovereignty, are the poor people also sovereign as well? Are the poor people also having the same freedom and same level of sovereignty as the rich? It is not the case. So when economics remains neutral, when there is high rate of poverty, high inequality of income and wealth in the economy, there are rich and poor, and they don't have equal economic opportunities, fair start, and equal purchasing power to get the objective needs. So in that case, economics remaining neutral is still a value judgment, and it is not like neutral in the morality sense. It is in the sense of being apathetic and insensitive to the needs of the poor. Now, he is not against market mechanism. So this is again and again we see in his writings that he is very much realistic. It's not like we just get a set of quotes and proverbs from his works, only idealistic vision, utopia, only things which are good in textbooks but not so much practicable. So he admits certain points in capitalism. He says that market mechanism can operate as coordination mechanism, but not as a sole arbiter of the desirable and the undesirable. The desirable and the undesirable should come from some non-human source, which is transcending the human beings and the human greed and the human subjectivities. So that should come from a moral code, and the moral code which is coming in the revealed knowledge is transcending the limits of humans and their biases, and that is a better way to be acting as a sole arbiter rather than market mechanism being taken as a sole arbiter, because markets give more dollar votes to the rich and they serve their subjective wants more as compared to the objective needs. That is why we see in many developing countries, sanitation is underserved, even though there are 5G connections, even though there are expensive resorts, even though billions are spent in sports and entertainment and video games and films, even though sanitation is a problem, even though clean drinking water is a problem, even though housing is a problem, even though poverty is still existing, but then still we see that subjective wants are fulfilled, not objective needs, because the private sector is looking at the profit as the sole reason why to allocate resources. He writes in his research paper, Challenge of Global Capitalism, purchasing power is determined by the distribution of income and wealth in society, and that is not equally distributed. But when an economy suffers from gross inequalities, then what happens? The priorities of production and consumption are not in keeping up with the needs of the majority of people in that society, because the poor are the ones who are in majority. They are the ones who are in majority, but they have the less purchasing power. Those who have the higher dollar votes, the rich, they are able to get the markets serving them. So the production and consumption priorities would be misplaced if the purchasing power is not equal. He writes that inequalities are not to be reduced arbitrarily, just like we have socialism. So he is not arguing for abandoning inequality or wage differentiation, he admits that inequalities as a result of differences in people's skills, in their abilities, in their effort, in their achievement motivation is all justified if the economic opportunities are available equitably. So what he wants is fair start, equitable economic opportunities. After that, if there is difference in wage, difference in income, difference in the outcome of the functional distribution of income due to differences in merit-based features like skill differences, ability differences, effort differences, achievement motivation differences, then he is willing to admit inequalities. But the systemic inequities where inequities are inbuilt into the features of the system through certain institutions like interest-based financial system, like capitalistic democracies where the major capitalist powers are funding the political campaigns of the politicians, and there is a connivance between the politicians and the rich capitalists to make policies which enable taxation laws, which enable certain provisions which are pro-rich rather than pro-poor. So systemic inequities distort the entire spectrum of a society's productive and consumption priorities and the research allocation decisions and even democracy. So he is aware of this fact that when capitalists are like very much powerful, they would also have power to affect politics. And this is what we see in the real world as well, that like in USA, we see the current president is also having a background as a business person. So these systemic inequities are the problems, not the inequities which result from differences in economic features and merit-based features. When the market mechanism becomes the only source of values, so that is where he sees that market mechanism can become a problem. When it becomes the only source of value in secular democracies, in secular worldview, where there is no revealed knowledge which is guiding the ethical and morality behind things. So when market mechanism becomes the only source of value, then the ethical norms are gradually eroded and the dimensions of justice is grossly violated. And it might not reflect very prominently within the nation, but if you look at the political economy of issues between nations, like when we deal with other nations, when we look at how one nation deals with other nations in a nation state, so what we see is that there is not even cases where law is followed. So like the international law, we see it completely abundant and decimated by some nations who are having more political power as compared to some of the weaker nations. So we do not see that even law is followed, let alone morality. So he writes that like law is the bare minimum of ethics, and morality is much more than it is individualistic, and it includes not only the prevention of harm but also some affirmative action. So morality is like having much more broad ethical guidelines as compared to law, but even law is not followed in the political economy of issues between nations, within nations. So he says that globalization driven by capitalism. So what we see is the growth in globalization, and that is happening in a capitalistic age. Driven by capitalism, globalization has led to further economic challenges like there are organizations like WTO, World Bank, IMF. They have programs for developing countries where the developing countries' interests are not safeguarded, and they are not given the choice to exercise resource allocation over the natural resources which they have. So there is disregard for the economic health of poor countries and their environment, and negative impacts happen on indigenous cultures, and the economic sovereignty of nations is undermined. So like he says that there is a contradiction in capitalistic practice. They talk about freedom at the individual level, but then they are not giving freedom to entire nations, entire communities, and they are trampling over the rights and sovereignty of nations, even though in textbooks they would say that we hold freedom as a virtue at the individual level, but only for people who are living within their nation state. But across nation states, they have different standards. So that is what he criticizes, that morality has to be universal. And it can only be universal when we regard every human as a same creature at the same level as Khalifa and as Abd of Allah. So he emphasizes that the Tawhidic epistemology is having the basis to ensure that we get rid of all the biases in terms of racism, in terms of ethnic differences and like linguistic differences and so on. Now, when he talks about socialism, he says that socialism has identified ills in capitalism, but socialism has also some problems. And also, socialism has not been able to give a proper diagnosis of capitalism. It has highlighted some problems, but not all. Like, it has not mentioned about colonial exploitation. So it said that much of the inequities that we see in global wealth in the 18th and 19th centuries, there is a reason behind it, and that reason is colonial exploitation. But when the historical dialectical materialism theory is presented, they do not like mention the political side. They say, okay, we move from feudalism to capitalism, and now we have to move to socialism, and then eventually to communism. But in between, there is political exploitation in the colonial rule, and that is completely ignored by those socialist scholars. So, at the academic level, he makes this criticism that socialism is not looking at the history in a holistic way. It is not just looking at the political side of things and just the economic organization and economic structure side of things. He admits that socialism does highlight certain ills in capitalism, and we must admit that the capitalism had to make certain reforms because of the socialistic critique. But then he mentioned that socialism also has problems. The problems are that there is a state repression. And in this book, Socialism in Islam, it is one of his lengthiest book. He has mentioned that there are several examples of state repression in a socialist setup. He gave examples from Eastern Europe, from Russia, from other parts of the world where socialism was practiced. And there is denial of private property rights altogether. Yes, there is a problem of inequities in private property ownership. You have to correct that. But to correct that, you should not have the other extreme, which is to deny property rights altogether. And to kill incentives altogether, which is a basis of productivity increases, innovation, adaptability, more investment. So killing incentives, denying property rights, state repression, and centralizing planning and allocation decision, which brings about a problem of miscoordination, which can result in sometimes more resources going into industries where they should not be going, less resources going into industries where there should be more resources going. So there would be even problems of shortage and surplus when you have centralized planning and allocation in an economy where there are many industries, not just agriculture or primitive kind of economy. So socialism highlighted the ills in capitalism. Prof. Khurshid Ahmad admits that, but he also mentioned that socialism could not provide an alternate that was better than the former. So because the socialism's critique is quite right about capitalism, it does not automatically mean that its reform agenda, its own alternative, is also accepted. So he mentions that now he was writing these research papers and books in a time when socialism was really a competitor to capitalism, both in terms of politics as well as in economy. So he was writing these books in 60s and 70s. And even in the Muslim majority countries, there was this discussion that the critique of capitalism in the socialist literature agenda is very much right. And it seems like socialism is very much Islamic. And then there were authors and even politicians who were looking for Islamic socialism. So they thought that maybe it is better to side with socialism rather than capitalism. So some politicians and some thinkers, some activists, some scholars, they came up with the idea that socialism is very much Islamic and we should have Islamic version of socialism. To them, he writes, Prof. Khurshid Ahmad writes that because we share some common goal with socialism. Socialism also talks about equality, rights of the poor, rights of the labor. We also talk about that in Islamic economics. So just because we have some common goal, just because we have some shared criticism, capitalism, and just because we also have Muslim history, Muslim societies in the past which have had long-standing autocratic regimes. So this also seems like very much consistent with socialism, that socialism is also talking about state control, government playing a very active role, and we also have Muslim history, Muslim civilization, in which after the four caliphs, democracy was not there, and most of the time we were having the Maluki, the kings and the autocratic regimes. So because we have also had this kind of a history and there was no problem in doing that, and the Fuqaha also like very much legitimized and took it as acceptable. Does it mean that we can also embrace socialism? He says no. No need to presume that common ground between socialism and Islamic economics is possible on the pretext of sharing common goals, sharing same criticism on capitalism, and because we also have Muslim civilization having autocratic regimes. He says Islamic principles do not give credence to autocracy. He says that Islam is based on shura. Islamic political system is based on shura, which is consultative decision making. Now he makes a difference between secular democracy and the operational democracy. He says that if you take the operating principles of democracy and work them out under the stipulations and paradigm of Sharia, then this is Shura-based system. This is consultative decision. This is different from secular democracy, where secular democracy boils down to secularism. But he says that you can have operating principles of democracy within the stipulations of the Sharia, and then that is fine. And he also mentioned that still this would not be theocracy. We discussed that in the later slide. So he says about operational democracy in this quote, the operational models are based on the principles of liberty, equality, constitutionalism, rule of law, division of power between different organs of the state, including the three levels, the executive, legislature, and judiciary, having fundamental rights, having rights of minorities, having freedom of belief, having freedom to share opinion, expression, having freedom to associate with one or the other group, having freedom to have free press, free communication. The substance of democracy seeks expression in the vision of a government that is chosen by the people. This is not inconsistent with Islam. Operates in the service of the people. This is also not inconsistent with Islam. And the government should be run in accordance with the wishes and preferences of the collectivity of people and be accountable before the people. So he says that if we look at this operational model of democracy, this is very much consistent with Islam. But the system has to be run under the stipulation and the paradigm of Sharia. And when that is incorporated, then it is different from secular democracy. So he is like criticizing socialism, and those Muslim scholars and thinkers who thought that yes, state repression is also consistent with Islam. He says that no, Islamic principles do not talk about state control in an autocratic way. Islamic principles about political management talk about shura, consultative decision making, and the operating principles of democracy are very much consistent with Islam. Then he gives in his writings examples of operational democracy in Muslim culture, like voice and accountability in the periods of the four pious caliphs. He gives account of many riwayat in which like Hazrat Umar, he was questioned about one person that how you got two pieces of cloth, whereas everyone else has got just one cloth. So he had to mention and he had to clarify, and he did not say, "How dare you ask me this question?" He did not say that. Once he asked that, "What if I would err and I would not follow the Sharia? What would you do? Would you follow me?" People said, "No, we would straighten you like a arrow." So then he said that you are useful people to me. You are like a good guide for me. He did not say, how dare you say this? How dare you question my authority? He did not say this. So voice and accountability was there in the period of the four pious caliphs, and these are the guide for us. So which means that operational democracy is very much consistent. He also mentions the operational democracy principles and examples in Muslim culture in the form of the institution of mosque and Jummah Sermon. So that was like a communal place where communication would happen between the public servants and the government, and the discussion would be there on issues and policies. So mosque and Jummah sermon also show that operational democracy can be like run through this or that way. The principles are there. It's just that their realization could be different in one or the other way. Like we could not have adult franchise back then because of technological and logistical constraints. Now we can have through improvement in technology and logistics and communication and transportation. So we can adopt different structures, but the principles are there, and the examples of principles is also there in Muslim culture and institutions. So presence of autocratic regimes in Muslim history do not show that Islam as a principle permits autocratic regimes. Now he mentions one very important line: men are one. And when he's writing men, meaning all humans are one, not Burmese, not proletarian, not white, not black, not Aryan, not non-Aryan, not Westerner or Eastern. So what he's saying is that this view of socialism to come as a opposition to capitalism in an antagonistic way, in a reactionary way, is not correct, because when we have reactionary isms, they create more trouble and more injustice as compared to the system they want to replace. So he gives examples of fascism, he gives examples of socialism, and if we use this logic, now we see feminism. So that is also reaction to suppression of women. So that may, as a antagonistic reaction to suppression of women, be more like problematic and go to the other extreme. So he thinks that we should not move from one extreme to the other. We should not have isms which are just reactionary. We should treat everyone as equal, as human beings, no matter whether they are capitalist or the labor. What is important is we have to uphold justice, and that is more important as compared to any particular ism we subscribe. To the assertion in socialism that religion is opium, and Nietzsche, he mentioned that religion promotes slave morality, but he was criticizing Christianity because his context was having Christianity as the face of religion, and that was also the face of religion to Marx. So when Marx and Nietzsche, they were criticizing religion, they were criticizing the Christian thoughts at that time. And in fact, not of Christianity, but only the form of Christianity which was saying to the poor that you have to be content with what you have. So Nietzsche said that religion promotes slave morality, like be content with your state of affairs, not complaining. To the assertion of religion being opium, this statement was given by Marx that religion is like a opium. So it, in the words of Nietzsche, it promotes slave morality. Khurshid Ahmad explains that Islam awakens a sense of social responsibility and man, and neither neglects the individual nor the society. So Islam creates a balance. Islam is not saying that because you are poor, just stay content with this and do not make effort. Islam says no, make an effort. You are socially responsible, not only for your own welfare but also welfare of others. So Islam awakens a sense of social responsibility rather than giving a reason to be just not doing anything and giving a reason for inaction. Islam promotes cooperation in goodness and non-cooperation in badness. Islamic economic system is rooted in Tawhidic epistemology, and it does not deny, according to him, Islamic economics does not deny personal freedom, social freedom, and economic freedom. Islam allows personal freedom in the personal matters. Islam also allows social freedoms. Islam also allows economic freedoms. Islam avoids the polar extremes, not laissez-faire, not state repression. and yet provides a path to achieve human welfare in a just way, in an equitable way, in a responsible way, keeping in perspective the goals, the visionary goals of achieving need fulfillment, human-centric, broad-based development. Humans are not only the means to bring about development, but also the ends of human development. And promotion of social interest is also very much important in Islamic economics. To the argument that socialism is very much like close to Islam because it talks about social solidarity and community and having one community rather than having differences, ending class conflict and becoming one community after all. He says that Islam is also not against social solidarity, not against communal cooperation. Islam says there should be social solidarity, there should be communal cooperation, but while keeping differences, it is allowed, and the social solidarity and communal cooperation is reflected in mu'akhat between Muhajir and Ansar, in Misaki Medina between Muslims and Jews. But it cannot become a pretext to take away the socio-economic freedom. Like social solidarity is important, but it does not necessarily mean that to achieve that we have to have state repression. To achieve that we have to take away the socio-economic freedoms. Professor Khurshid also clarifies the concern that Islamic democracy is not theocracy. What is theocracy? That we have the clergy making all the rules, and they decide what is correct, what is not, what is right, what is not, what is legal, what is not. Islam is not having a theocracy or vulnerability to become theocracy, because in Islam we take revealed knowledge as a guide, and revealed knowledge is open to all. And revealed knowledge is something that we cannot add on to, and that is there clearly with us, and we can use it to interpret. And so meaning that there is no clergy class, no human intermediary in Islam who is going to like reinterpret or even rewrite the revealed knowledge, which happened in Christianity. Like some people say that Saint Paul actually completely changed the Christian code. That is not happening in Islam, because after the finality of prophethood, there is no human intermediary and no priestly class or clergy who is going to rewrite the revealed knowledge, because the Sharia is an open source of guidance for all in a Muslim society. So Islam is not for theocracy. Islam is not vulnerable to theocracy. It would take on the operating principles of democracy, but under the stipulations of Sharia. Islamic economic system does not permit exploitation of poor borrowers by wealthy capitalists, but it does not regard capital or wealth as an evil. In Quran, it is mentioned that wealth is regarded as fazl of Allah. So Prof. Khurshid also mentions that verse. However, this blessing has to be acquired in permissible ways. First of all, when we are acquiring wealth, we have to avoid akala amwal batil. We have to use the resources in socially responsible spending and investment, and without the opportunity to just park the capital idle. Now, if we look at his views on the role of state, Prof. Khurshid Ahmad mentions Islamic economics presents a positive role of the state, meaning it's not like he is saying that because I am criticizing socialism on these and these points, it means I am for laissez-faire. No, there can be a role for the state, and a positive role of the state, meaning not just preventing the harm, preventing evil, maintaining law and order, but beyond that, there can be a positive role of the state as well. State cannot and should not be a passive spectator like a laissez-faire. It has a regulatory role, it has a corrective role to play out so as to ensure fulfillment of society's goals, to achieve need fulfillment, to uplift the poor, to at least enable them to meet their basic needs. However, he cautions that this role should not be carried out at the expense of taking up individual freedom to pursue economic opportunities. The state has a positive role to play, particularly in the nature of supervision, guidance, and essential regularization, yet also to ensure freedom, economic opportunity, and property rights. So he is giving a very balanced view of the state, and which is not like making it laissez-faire and not making it like socialism. Now we come to his views on looking at economic agents as individuals or as family or as community. So he says that if we look at the Islamic literature, the revealed knowledge, Islam says that human beings are acting as Khalifa of Allah. So role of Khalifa is shared equally by men and women. So in his book, Family Life in Islam and also Women in Islam, he mentions that the role of Khalifa is a role which is shared equally by men and women. So they are equal in terms of human beings, in terms of being Khalifa of Allah. Islam regards family system as a strong contract, Nisaqan Ghaliza, in which both husband and wife are part of the social contract, strong contract. Enter in this contract, they enter in this contract with not only consent but a serious recognition and commitment to fulfill mutual responsibilities. And then he mentions what are those responsibilities and what is the objective and function of the family in Islam. He says preservation and continuation of the human race in a Sharia compliant way in marriage rather than outside of it. Protection of morals by providing a framework for fulfilling the natural urges that we have, but within a marriage. Providing psycho-emotional stability, love and kindness. Providing socialization and value orientation of children. Providing social and economic security. If there is a widow, if there is an orphan, if there are children, left on their own after the death of parents, so there are inheritance laws. There are other stipulations which safeguard the rights of widows and orphans. So social economic security is possible in the family system of Islam. And mainstream economics completely disregards it. It models human behavior like he is born at 20 years of age and making an economic choice from his limited income. But from where this limited income comes, from where the education comes, from where the possibility comes that a person becomes able to provide labor supply. That happens after 20 years, not after a person is born. So the role of family is completely not recognized in mainstream economics, but Prof. Khurshid mentions that role of family is very much important in Islamic discourse, especially in Islamic economics. Widening the family horizon. So he mentions that when you look at the family system in an extended way, then it promotes social cohesion, which can be a basis to have high level of social capital, which improves the social fabric, social infrastructure, which can contribute to law and order, and which is very conducive to investment, capital formation, human capital development, and economic growth. So the motivation for effort and sacrifice also comes in family. Otherwise, everybody is for himself, herself. Like we see one of the Nobel laureate, Daniel Kahneman, he died, and after 1 year it was known that he has actually died by committing suicide, and there was no one to confirm because he was living alone in a place, and nobody knew what was the cause of his death. So even such notable persons can die in like vain and nobody notice, because if the family system is like weak and broken, then these kinds of things happen. Family system in Islam is the source of social security. Widows and orphans get their primary support from the extended family system. Family system contributes to character building, personality development. Islam encourages spending on family. Islam also has inheritance laws which support intergenerational transfer of resources. Family system in Islam brings unity and it strengthens social fabric. And when we talk about consumption smoothing in mainstream economics and macroeconomic literature, so that is possible through family. And in the life cycle hypothesis, we do not really see any role of family, even though it is the family who supports a person before he enters the working age and after he retires. And this social capital, which is strengthened through family system, it strengthens the social infrastructure, which is a precursor to achieve human capital development and subsequently economic development. Now we come to discuss his ideas about Islamization of education. He thinks that education in Islamic perspective has to be goal-oriented. not just public instruction, not just transfer of skills. It has to talk about values of social responsibility under the worldview of Tawhidic epistemology. He wants the education to be focusing on ideals and values, not just instruction, not just transfer of skills, because we can transfer skills to robots, to even animals. But human beings are not just animals; they are sentient beings, morally conscious beings, and they have a moral sense which has to be activated, which has to be developed and nurtured. And if the right learnings come, then it also has an effect on behavior. So education is more than public instruction too. He says that it is a process that develops a nation's self-awareness by nurturing individual self-consciousness. He thinks that education should encompass mental, physical, and moral development, aiming to produce individuals with excellent character who can contribute to society. He cautions against the indiscriminate adoption of foreign educational systems. He thinks that it's not like because West is very much advanced in science, we take everything coming from West without any critical inquiry and filtering. He thinks that liberal education is very much individualistic. It focuses on individual development and not so much on social responsibility. So he thinks that liberal education has failed to integrate knowledge and to address the deeper question of life. He thinks that the most important thing to know about is what are the answers to deeper questions of life, what are the answers to existential questions that would dictate and shape our morality, our conduct, and we are more than just workers. We are more than just skilled professionals. We are human beings, and we have to play many roles than just acting as labor in the production process, than just land provider in the production process. So we are much more than that. And to play out our role in society in a better way, in economy and beyond economy, it is important for education to be holistic and focused on development of morals and ideals. Purpose of education to him should be to prepare individuals for their roles in society and to contribute to its betterment. He criticizes the excessive focus on individualism in modern education. He also criticizes a specialization movement. He knows that yes, there is prolific growth in knowledge, there is prolific advancement of knowledge in all disciplines, and we have to like segregate, we have to have disciplinary boundaries, we have to have specialization, but the broad-based education cannot be undermined to equip individuals with the right mindset, with the right character, and with the vision. And this should not be blurred. He thinks that specialization sometimes blurs the vision towards the ideal. Specialization is necessary. He's also not like very idealistic and not realistic. He is realistic. He knows that sciences have advanced. We have to have a specialization. It is necessary, but it should not undermine the broad-based education and character building focus. Now, when it comes to Islamization of economics, he thinks that in economics, what has happened is there has been a decoupling of economics from other social sciences, and there has been individualistic tendencies coming into the economics. Like he mentions, society has been reduced to economy. Economy has been reduced to market. Market has been reduced to agents, and agents are just evolutionary byproduct of an accident. So by evolutionary accident, we have come about, and we are economic agents. We survive by our impulse and instincts. And survival of the fittest code means that we have survived as fittest survivor. So the way to survive even in future is to be using the code of survival, which we have through evolutionary cycle. So there is no concept of morality in that. In that, morality also comes into the picture if it is ensuring survival, and that is a very, very dangerous kind of philosophy, because then we are not having any morals which are going beyond the consequential morality. What is consequential morality? That something is good if its consequence is good, but if its consequence is like not good, at least in the short run, what we would say that something is not moral, something is not really virtuous. So that is the problem with economics, that we have so much focus on individualism, and we are not looking at the holistic picture. We are not looking at society as a whole. What is happening to society as a whole? What is happening to economy as a whole? We are just segregating the whole into parts: society into economy, economy to market, market to agents, agents as just accidental byproduct of evolution. He cautions against departmentalization. He thinks that economics has been decoupled from other disciplines like philosophy, which is very important to talk about moral issues, politics, which is what the basis of economics was. Initially, it was just political economy. So economics has been detached from politics, detached from sociology, detached from psychology. And because of this, we are looking at human beings as agents who have only one motive, which is not a realistic way to look at human beings who have so much complexity, moral consciousness, aesthetic sense, and multiple motives. So we cannot ignore psychology, and we cannot ignore history. We cannot also ignore other social sciences. So economics, when it was delinked according to him from other disciplines, led to this approach where we are looking at a very narrow lens. Through a very narrow lens, we are looking at economy and economic issues. He suggests as a solution, these linkages have to be restored and strengthened. How? If realistic solutions to human problems have to be worked out. He welcomes interdisciplinary approach as a must for this new beginning. Now, for him, the pathways for future, like he is, as we mentioned, that he is not just idealistic, he is also very much realistic and giving the solutions as well. So, to him, the pathway for future is bring focus back to the role of man as custodian, as Khalifa, fulfilling the trust, amana. Since behavior is influenced by learning, moral imperatives shall be part of education, especially economics education, to put check on materialistic instincts rather than remaining amoral and neutral between ends. Instead of providing blanket freedom to pursue greed, the focus should be on need fulfillment. So greed should be replaced by need fulfillment, and self-interest should be replaced by self plus social plus environmental responsibility. To him, neoclassical economics is individualistic and market-centric, whereas Islamic economics has to have a separate distinction and not just become a branch of mainstream economics. Now, when we look at his views on economic development, he thinks that development in Islamic economics has to be human-centric, and it has to be consistent with Islamic principles, and it has to use the policy instrument and design of Islamic economics. So the institutional structure through which we try to achieve economic development has to make use of Islamic instruments and institutions, the operating principles of Islamic economics. The end goals have to be human-centric and holistic and have to be consistent with Islamic principles. Now he knows that the reality is not that promising. He knows that Muslim countries are grappling, he writes, with widespread economic underdevelopment, characterized by underutilization of human and physical resources, resulting in poverty, stagnation, and backwardness. So he knows that economic development is not happening right now. But what he says, it is important to discern the essence of economic development rather than just playing catching up. So he thinks that we should not feel inferior and think that we are very much behind and just start trying to catch up, not looking at whether we are following the Islamic principles, whether we are using the Islamic policy instruments and institutions, whether we are looking at development from a holistic and human-centric perspective or not. So he thinks that catching up is to be done, but not in a hasty way, such that we do not understand the essence of economic development. He thinks that the Western experience of economic development has also some problems, even though in some indicators it has progressed, like the per capita income, but there are growing inequalities. There is damage to the environment. So many animal species, plant species have been decimated through this industrialization in the last few decades and centuries. So the trickle-down effect is a theory which is not proven by evidence. It is just a conjecture, and it did not happen. The inequalities kept on growing. The Kuznets curve could not have the shape it was supposed to have. So the trickle down effect does not happen in capitalism, in the capitalistic economic development. So we do not have to just catch up. We have to have our own ways of economic development. What are the steps to follow? According to him, first of all, identify the Islamic ideal of economic development and assess the gap between the ideal and the current state of the Muslim world. Like we have to achieve economic development on ground. He's not saying that vision is important, just look at vision and not talk about the reality. No, look at the reality, take a stock of what is the current state and what should have been. Look at the gap and then try to fill the gap through strategies which are within an Islamic framework. According to him, development planning exists in many Muslim countries, yet it often mirrors Western growth prototypes, neglecting to integrate Islamic ideals and values into development strategies. So he thinks that while we are playing catch up, we are playing catch up with the institutions, values, and programs of Western countries which are not suited to the context of Muslim majority countries. This has led to developmental policies that are more or less Islam neutral, failing to transform the economics of the Muslim world. So he thinks that Western model overemphasize industrialization, capital formation, technological transfer, but it neglected the social and cultural factors. This approach adopted as it is by the third world countries, which include mostly the Muslim majority countries, increased poverty, inequality, and dependence on foreign aid. So he is very much apprehensive of foreign aid. He mentions that foreign aid is not very suitable to the Muslim majority countries because it comes with certain political pressures and it compromises economic sovereignty and policy making. He thinks that Western economic development is individualistic, materialistic, whereas Islamic economics has to have its own way of looking at economic development to avoid things which are happening in capitalistic economic development story, social divisions, wasteful consumption, and moral decay. Islamic concept of development has to focus on human development across not only the material dimension but also moral and spiritual dimension. So he thinks that development in Islamic perspective has to go beyond just material but also have moral and spiritual elements of development. It encompasses the purification and growth of individuals and societies, striving for comprehensive well-being and prosperity in this world and the hereafter. Now he thinks that the goals of development policy in Islamic framework should be human resource development, expansion of useful production. So he thinks that when we talk about production, we also need to talk about whether that production is useful or not. Maybe frivolous entertainment is not that useful. So he thinks that it's not just that we have to increase the GDP, but what kind of production we are making. Is it really contributing to the real economy? Is it really contributing to the employment creation? If growth is happening without growth in jobs, if growth is happening with unemployment is still rising, then that growth is not very useful. So he mentions that Islamic economic development has to also talk about the useful production, involvement of the quality of life indicators, balanced development, inclusive development, evolution of new technologies. So he's not against like going for technological advancement. We should evolve new technologies. And he mentions that sometimes we can have a leapfrog kind of development if we have new technologies. So it's very much a very important goal in Islamic development policy to evolve new technologies and to reduce national dependency on the outside world. He mentions that we have to move away from simplified aggregate growth models because they cannot capture history, they cannot capture culture, they cannot capture morality, they cannot capture the context as well. And even in development discourse, it is now realized that we have to have differential diagnosis rather than one-size-fits-all approach. We should have multi-objective approach according to Prof. Khurshid Ahmad that addresses specific problematic areas. He wants to have active role for governments and especially in public sector to organize public sector in sectors which are socially important and to plug the gap of unmet needs which is left vacant by profit maximizing firms in the market economy, because they are only looking at profits. For them, sanitation might not be a very good business, so that would be underserved. For them, garbage collection might not be a very good business, and then that would be underserved. In those cases, public sector has to operate. So he's not favoring laissez-faire. He's also not favoring state repression. He is giving a balanced view of the state. Where it is needed, it can play a role. Where private sector fails, it can play a role, especially in the provision of public goods. He cautions against joining the polar extremes of Western economic system. He wants the policy making in Muslim countries to be homegrown, rooted in Islamic vision, flexible enough for adaptation, and multi-dimensional and human-centric. So he's like very much realistic. He wants the context-specific policies rooted in Islamic vision, but have to be flexible enough for adaptation and have to be multi-dimensional and have to be human-centric. Islam emphasizes integrated human development, encompassing moral, spiritual, and material dimensions. Islamic concept of development gives due importance to social justice. Growth for the sake of growth, according to Prof. Khurshid Ahmad, is not ideal, as there are limits to growth. Inequitable growth is not something which we really should strive for if it does not result in employment creation and need fulfillment. Humans should be put first, according to Prof. Khurshid Ahmad. There is a need for greater cooperation and integration among Muslim countries. According to Prof. Khurshid Ahmad, there should be more cooperation between the OIC member countries. He also wants to have a shift away from aid-based development, because that is very short-lived and that comes with a lot of political pressures that compromises economic sovereignty, political sovereignty, and that is not long-lasting. He favors and encourages self-reliance, but he also mentions that self-reliance does not mean that we have autarky. Self-reliance does not mean that we should have autarky. We should have trade with the rest of the world, but we should have our own policies and our own way of dealing with the world. We should not be approaching aid-based development and debt-based development, because that compromises our flexibility in our own policies and choices. Because the debt-based development strategy has led to increasing indebtedness for many third world countries, with a net transfer of resources from the poor to the rich. So he mentions that the aid which comes in, if we subtract from it the interest payment that are going out on the debt that we owe to the rest of the world, what we see is that there is a negative net transfer of resources from the poor to the rich. So that is not a useful way to look at development. He also criticizes the way some of the Middle Eastern countries are like, just getting dependent on oil. He wants them to be diversified. Depreciation of petrodollars in exchange of oil is not fruitful in the long run. He thinks that we are giving them natural resources, which is depletable, which has finite supply, and they are giving us fiat currency in return, and that has depreciation. So when the petrodollars would depreciate and the natural resources would not be there in the long run, what we will do? So we have to have self-reliance. We have to have independence and diversification of investment, production, and employment in other sectors. He thinks that globalization should not become a rubric of neo-colonialism. So we have to be very mindful and critical of all these developments. He mentioned that by self-reliance, he is not saying that we should be trying to be self-sufficient in everything and promote autarky. No, we have to trade with the world, but have flexibility and choice and freedom to make homegrown and context-specific policies which make use of Islamic economic teachings and institutions and operating principles. Now, last, we look at his policy views on how to Islamize the economy in practice. Like we said, that he was not just a visionary and academic, he was a senator in Pakistan as well. He also worked as a planning commission head. So he worked in the leadership positions as well. So what are his views on Islamizing the economy? So he has given thoughts on how to Islamize banking, and then also how to Islamize the beyond banking segment, like the monetary policy, fiscal policy, central banking, international trade, and so on. So he, on Islamization of banking, he has a view, which is very much the view of all scholars, the majority of the scholars. There is a consensus that bank interest is riba. And in his academic work, he defines riba in a very in a very academic way, in a very learned way, which is that riba is an unearned income in money loans. So it is a income which is unearned or illegitimate. And he defines riba in a very comprehensive way, meaning that riba includes any predetermined increase over the value of principal amount of loan, and it does not matter whether the loan is taken for personal need or commercial motive, whether the parties to the contract are individuals or organizations or government. So whether it is I to I to B, B to I, B to C, C to B, G to G, G to B, B to G. So it does not matter who are the contracting parties, because there is some discussion in Islamic economics literature that if, let's say, one department of government is taking loan from other department of government, because overall the institution is government, if there is interest involved, it is like it is only going from my left hand to right hand. So some people try to like legitimize interest on this basis, but he criticizes that, because in that way you would say that a socialistic government where government has a public sector, riba would be just legitimized, because it is just transfer of riba from one government department to the other government department. So he thinks that economic basis of both riba and usury is time value of money, and that is not on. So he gives the economic rationale of riba prohibition. Now, what is his vision? So what should be replaced with riba? So how we replace riba? So he says that we should replace riba like this. We should have loan capital replaced into venture capital. He promotes financial intermediation based on equity financing, like using mudaraba and musharaka. And he knows that mudaraba and musharaka would be successful if we have a vibrant capital market, which can have foresight, meaning people are aware of the potential of the business and also the performance of the business. So when you have a vibrant capital market, then there is information symmetry between the investors and the people who are doing the business. So he wants the capital market to be well developed and vibrant and well informed, so that if there is information as symmetry rather than information asymmetry, then there would be possibility of broad-based participation, which would bring about liquidity, which would bring about efficient pricing, and which would promote equity-based financing more. So he's like very much aware of the technical and the academic side of things when he proposes this solution. Now, on Islamic banking, unlike other academic scholars, he is not wholly and solely criticizing Islamic banking. He is not condemning Islamic banking. He is saying, give it benefit of infancy, meaning it's a very new institution. It would take time to mature. So he gives it benefit of infancy. He wants the critics to be balanced and constructive and provide solution for expediting the transition process in the right direction. He admits that individuals differ in their risk preferences, so that we have availability of different products, of different financial institutions, mutual funds, banks, venture capital funds, and so on. So like he mentions that we cannot have just one institution doing all things. We can have commercial financial institutions, social financial institutions, wealth management institutions, credit institutions, so and different kinds of products for different kinds of customers with different risk preferences and risk tolerance. So he's willing to admit a space for different kinds of financial institutions to evolve within Islamic finance. But he mentions that sound governance framework is very important, especially in the background. There were a lot of failures of mudaraba-based projects and private equity projects failed. So then people had this apprehension, especially when loss occurs. When profit occurs, then everybody is like, Subhanallah, mashallah, Islamic banking is doing wonders. But when loss occurs, then we say, what kind of Islamic banking is this? So he says that sound governance framework is very much important. And now if we look at the second phase of Islamic banking, where the sound governance framework has been adopted, especially in Malaysia and also Middle East and South Asia. Now we see that under the sound governance framework, Islamic banking is much more mature, stable, and not prone to risk as it was in the earlier phase. He cautions bringing riba from the back door by using instruments such as buyback transaction. He is also not comfortable with inflation indexation. And he gives reasoning. He says that if you allow inflation indexation in loans, like if you allow positive rate of interest on the context that there is erosion in time value of money because of inflation, if you allow this in loans, why not you allow it in wage? Why not you allow it in pensions? So if you do not allow inflation adjustment in wage setting, in rent, in pensions, then why you only serve the capitalist need? So he says that inflation and interest rate are two separate problems. Do not try to solve interest problem by inflation indexation. So what he is like emphasizing on is avoid patchwork, avoid mimicry, have holistic vision and bring up distinct modes of financing. He clarifies that Islamic economics is not just riba free. It is not a sufficient condition to Islamize economics. Whole of the socio-economic system has to be Islamized. And that would happen when it operates under the moral imperatives of the Islamic economic principles, values, and teachings, not just the teachings which make Sharia non-compliant to compliant, but also which make Sharia compliant to become the ideal. Sharia compliant to become the ideal, halal and tayyib. So Islamic economic principles, values, and teachings have to be incorporated. He explains that Islam's socio-economic program is interconnected, meaning it's not like you Islamize banking and even if you don't do anything to other systems, it would still give as much fruit as promised. No, it would not happen. With Islamic banking, you need to have Islamic finance. With Islamic finance, you need to have Islamic economy. With Islamic economy, you need to have Islamic values and morality reflected in the other laws and systems and structures of the society. When all of this would happen, then the fruits of the Islamic economic teachings would be felt by everyone. So Islamic socio-economic program is interconnected, and implementing one part in isolation is not that effective. Now on financialization of economy, he is very critical, and he summarizes the financialization in a very succinct and a very informative way. He says that initially we had focused on real economy, like you work with real factors of production, land, physical capital stock, you work with commodities, raw materials, you have exchange where money is involved, and then you end up with more commodity. So commodity converting into monetary exchange, and then you have more commodities. Commodity to money to commodity was the relationship. Now this has changed to money, commodity, and money. So money is not just the facilitator of exchange, it has become the end goal and subject matter of trade. And now when we see the size of the financial derivatives market, size of the foreign exchange market, in many of his articles he emphasizes on the size of the foreign exchange market. He says that if we look at the size of the international trade, size of the foreign exchange transaction is much more than that, even 100 times more than that. So then what is the need of all these transactions? This is definitely not for hedging purpose. This is for speculative purpose. This is for the purpose of getting more money from money. So he thinks that the real economy has been undermined through financialization of the economy. Focus has shifted from production to monetary gain, with money becoming an end in itself rather than just acting as a means of exchange. Which leads to a bubble economy driven by derivatives and virtual claims on assets. And if you look at the global financial crisis, he had two papers on global financial crisis in which he emphasized that how over financialization of the economy, where the financial contracts decouple from real economy and then also decouple from assets, then this is very problematic. He is not against having compensation to investment capital. So he is not saying zero interest means zero return to capital. No, investment capital can have return, but on profit and loss sharing basis. So zero riba does not mean zero return. Return can be positive, but it has to be earned just like an entrepreneur. We cannot say that capitalist is having the right to receive predetermined increase, because there is another factor of production, entrepreneur, who is already taking the risk. If you look at the investors in the equity market, they don't have the guarantee of the par value of the stock in which they are investing, and also they do not have any surety of the dividend. Still they invest, and still you have huge size of capital market. When this is happening side by side, what is the excuse the money capital providers have to not work on the profit and loss sharing basis. He also favors common currency between Muslim countries to avoid the negative spillover effects in transactions with the rest of the world. He also writes on how to replace interest rate as a price of capital, like using accounting rate, using shadow rate, using profit sharing ratio, replacing the interest rate, using macroeconomic indicators like GDP growth. He also shares the aspiration for developing multilateral institutions governing and facilitating trade and financial flows among the Muslim majority countries. So just like we have Asian Development Bank, World Bank, IMF, there should be these institutions coming across the Muslim countries. The Islamic Development Bank is already there, and common currency and these kinds of institutions have to be evolved, and he favors more integration between the Muslim countries. Now, on fiscal policy, he knows there are certain problems. Like if we avoid riba, then we have to face the problem of how to manage deficits after elimination of riba, how to balance the budget over time. If not now, but at least in the long run, we have to balance the budget. And then within the budget, we also need to look at how we allocate resources, keeping into account broad objectives of equitable distribution of income, social justice, and welfare, and also taking into account that we have to manage the deficit after all. If we do not have riba-based source of borrowing, and we are having very weak tax collection in Muslim majority countries. So he is aware of the problems. On deficit financing, he says that deficit financing must be under the limit of growth in the economy. Now, if we look at the application of this principle, this can be applied to the issuance of GDP-linked instrument to finance the government need. And this kind of instrument could also serve as a price of capital in an Islamic economy. So he is one of the few scholars in the 80s who have talked about it. So even though now in the recent literature we have many other authors also favoring this view, but originally this was given by Prof. Khurshid Ahmad in 1983 in one of his articles that we can have GDP-linked instrument to finance the government need. Now, if we use mudaraba and musharaka, there is a problem of moral hazard. There is a problem of what happens if loss happens. So he mentions that we can reduce the risk of loss by having a portfolio approach. So yes, if we talk about government, it may have certain public sector enterprises which are in loss and certain other organizations which are in profit. If you create a mutual fund in which there are stocks of all the government sector enterprises, let's say most of them are in profit, some of them are in loss, but altogether the portfolio would have positive rate of return and much less risk of loss. So he favors that government can also do this, that rather than issuing a GDP-linked instrument, it creates a mutual fund in which the stocks of public sector enterprises are there, and the investment management is done by professional portfolio managers. And this portfolio approach and professional investment management will ensure that the rate of return on government investment is positive as well as stable with minimum risk of loss. And then this return can become a source of return for pricing different contracts and instruments in the real economy, in the consumer financing and corporate financing. Now he knows that when we want to Islamize the economy, we have to take a transition process, we have to take an evolutionary approach. He gives this solution. First, Islamize banking, then the development financial institutions, then mutual funds, then specialized financial institutions like agri-based banks, SMEs, and housing. So he gives this kind of a approach to transition. Islamize commercial banks first, then development financial institutions, then specialized financial institutions, including agriculture, SMEs, and housing finance-based institutions. And then he says that because government is a major client of financing in Muslim majority countries, government has to first of all Islamize itself, meaning refrain from T-bill and use the Islamic source of financing for its needs. Then impetus would come to Islamization. Otherwise, if government, a major client, is using T-bill, then all the consumer financing combined, all the corporate financing combined would not be still strong enough and big enough to Islamize the economy and to have impetus towards Islamization of economy. So he wants government as a major client of financing to go towards Islamic modes of financing. For debt between government institutions, he thinks that the conversion to riba-free basis is much easier because the ownership is with government. So it's not like government has to convince any outsider, rest of the world, or any private sector institution. It has to just manage the debt within its different organs. So converting intergovernment debt is easier. And then in the very last stage, you go for Islamization of the economy with the external sector. So in the first stage of government transition to riba free, he says that riba based debts shall be converted to riba free debt in intergovernment debt obligation. In some cases, debt can be remitted altogether, like just forgiven. In other cases, it cannot be forgiven because of the huge amount involved and because of like liquidity problems. So in those cases, what can happen is we can have conversion of riba-based debt into riba-free debt. And in the private sector debt, if the government has taken debt with private sector, let's say from the individuals, government has taken debt like the government saving bonds and so on. So how to like make them riba free by converting debt with equity. So offer debt swap with equity. For the state-owned enterprises, debt swap with equity would work. For consumer-related bonds, like government saving bonds, debt base has to be converted to debt-free by using the interest-free financing modes. So like he is very much aware of how to bring about transition. He wants to move from commercial banking to DFIs, development finance institution, then to government, and within government, first intergovernment debt, then debt with private sector, and when the national economy is Islamized, then go with Islamization of the economy with the rest of the world. And then he mentions that those who say that IMF, World Bank, Asian Development Bank, these institutions would not welcome Islamic banking. He mentions from their staff working papers and from their reports that they are very much willing and ready to use Islamic modes of finance. So meaning that there is no excuse that because they would be unwilling, we cannot use Islamic modes of financing. So this is the last slide. If you look at his legacy, he institutionalized effort. He wanted the effort to be like transcendent and not limited to his life and his work alone. He institutionalized efforts by developing institutions. He encouraged and promoted interfaith and inter-system dialogues by becoming one of the participants of those dialogues through the institution he built and also going across and contributing and collaborating with other institutions as well, other platforms as well. At IPS, where I also worked briefly, I saw that even those who are like socialists, leftists, who are from other faiths, who are from different other countries, they would all come and have a dialogue. We took a holistic viewpoint. He did not lose sight of the vision and the Islamic worldview. He engaged in complexity of transition pathways. This is very important because many times academics, they give very lofty and utopian kind of ideas, but they know that they are not practicable and they do not engage in complexity of transition pathways. He engaged in transition pathways as well. He engaged in policy, discourse, and leadership, and he was very optimistic, always. If you look at his personality traits, what has been said by different of his students and colleagues and workers who have worked under him, he was very committed and dedicated. He practiced gratitude and compassion, optimistic, always towards adversity. So whenever he was approached as to what would be the Islamic solution to a particular problem, he would give his thoughts. He would not think that like this person does not have political will. I can mention one example, like in Pakistan, there was a ruling a few years back that the government has to Islamize the whole of economy in 5 years. To many people, including me, we were not very like optimistic about the political will to really achieve it. It looked like just a way to like pass on some political resentment and so on. But he was like very much serious. He said that even if government is not serious, if there is opportunity to speak, we should speak. So he was very optimistic. He practiced lifelong and broad learning. One of the last books which he ordered were from an author who was having very different views than the views of his
ideas and ideology and the ideology of Jamaat Islami and Maulana Wahiduddin Khan. So he ordered the books of Maulana Wahiduddin Khan, and he was like very much opposite to the thoughts of Jamaat Islami and Maulana Maududi, but still he wanted to learn what he had to say. He practiced lifelong and broad learning. Some people say that he would read the newspaper, till the night, and not, delaying the work till tomorrow, because he thought that tomorrow is a new day of learning, and I would have more things to learn tomorrow. So I do not want to leave things for tomorrow. He inspired a lot of people. One way we look at the legacies to look at how many people he has inspired. So when his death news came, people all across the world and platforms and academics, as well as people who were from the opposing party. So he became a senator from 3 different provinces of Pakistan, and also he worked alongside the people who were socialists and also who were secularists, and they also came with good thoughts about him. So he inspired future scholars and leaders, including a lot of our luminaries. So due to shortage of time, I would not go on and on. So with that, we end the discussion. If there are any comments and questions, you are welcome.